taking opportunity at this stage. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Please do settle down. We will be starting in a few minutes. We are now on commission number 4. The last, or almost the last, no, the one but last commission. I'm waiting for people to settle down. Okay. Just as a matter of housekeeping rules, colleagues, you would know that on your tables there are gadgets, either they are black or the other ones will be blue. The blue gadgets are only for English, and then the black gadgets on channel 1 is English, channel 2 is Chinese, channel 3 is Portuguese, and channel 4 is Russian. That is for our colleagues who need interpretation. As displayed behind me, my name is Thuli Sandlela. I am a member of the National Youth Development Agency Board and will be your facilitator for this session. In keeping with our previous way of doing things, we want to start by allowing our colleagues from our BRICS member countries to be able to come and make their opening statements relating to today's commission. We are going to start. Can I get an indication if the Brazilian delegation is here? Yes, we are going to start with Brazil, followed by Russia, followed by our Indian colleagues, and then we will ask China to round it up. When you come here, please do note that you have 5 to 7 minutes to make your opening statements, and then at which point I will ask my panel to join me this side. So to kick it off, we're going to ask our Brazilian colleagues, Mr. Rafael, to please do come make your opening statements. A round of applause, please. Thank you. I have already, I did say. Yes, please.
Hello. Senhoras e senhores, imagine um mundo onde oportunidades nascem. Um moment.
Okay, guys, this is why we have gadgets in front of you. Please put them on. You know, when I said put on your gadgets, this is why. If you don't have gadgets, please do indicate. Our team will be able to come towards where. Channel number is in Portuguese, channel number 3. Is it 1 or 3? Is it 1 or 3? Yeah, but if he's speaking Portuguese, so we must. If you're English. Okay, guys, if you want to listen to him in English, go to channel 1. But mina ngoba ngiyasazi Portuguese, ngizayibamba la channel 3. So sengenzela ukuthi, you know, because I am game, so I'm in train. So channel 1, if you still don't have, please do indicate, our team will be able to get to you. My brother, you have the floor.
Hello. Senhoras e senhores, imaginem um mundo onde oportunidades nascem, a pobreza se reduz e a disparidade de renda é diminuída. Um mundo onde o crescimento econômico não é mais um sonho, mas realidade. Não falamos de uma utopia, mas do mundo prometido pelo comércio internacional. Para tornar essa promessa realidade, é necessário confrontar nosso passado e buscar um sistema que reflita nosso presente e futuro. O sistema internacional precisa se transformar, tornar-se mais inclusivo e responder às necessidades dos países em desenvolvimento. É tempo de dar a esses países não apenas um lugar à mesa, mas uma voz que seja ouvida. É tempo de criar um cenário que valorize a igualdade e a prosperidade compartilhada. Nessa dança das forças econômicas, encontramos o Acordo Livre Comércio Continental Africano, AFCFTA. Este acordo traz a promessa de abrir oportunidades inéditas, impulsionar o crescimento econômico e construir pontes de comércio. Para o Brasil, a África é mais do que um continente, é um espelho da nossa história, nossa identidade. Carregamos o peso de um passado que viu os africanos arrancados de suas terras e trazidos para o Brasil. Esse capítulo brutal da escravidão deixou uma cicatriz em nossa memória coletiva, cicatriz que reconhecemos e qual aprendemos. O Brasil é lar de mais de 100 milhões de afro-brasileiros, formando, assim, a segunda maior população negra do mundo, após a Nigéria. Essa conexão com a África pulsa no ritmo do nosso samba, saboreia a nossa feijoada e inspira a nossa capoeira. Está presente em nossa história, cultura e identidade. Nesse contexto, o comércio ganha um significado mais profundo. Torna-se uma troca de respeito, um caminho para o crescimento mútuo e um instrumento para combater o racismo. O AFCFTA oferece uma plataforma para fortalecer nossos laços econômicos, aprender uns com os outros e trabalhar para um futuro compartilhado de desenvolvimento. Ao olhar para o futuro, devemos entender que nosso relacionamento com a África vai além do comércio. Trata-se de compartilhar boas práticas e desenvolver soluções para nossos desafios comuns. A tecnologia agrícola do Brasil, que transformou a agricultura no Cerrado, pode fazer o mesmo na África. Da mesma forma, à medida que as cidades africanas se preparam para o rápido crescimento urbano, há uma oportunidade para colaboração em planejamento urbano e desenvolvimento de infraestrutura. Enquanto nos aprofundamos no mundo do comércio internacional, devemos lembrar que nosso objetivo final não é apenas entender essas forças, mas usá-las para bem maior. Nossa missão é criar um mundo onde a prosperidade seja compartilhada, a diversidade celebrada e a história compartilhada que nos guie para um futuro mais justo. Obrigado, thank you, e embarquemos nessa jornada transformadora do comércio internacional, cheia de identidades compartilhadas, respeito mútuo e prosperidade comum. Thank you. Obrigado.
Thank you very much, my brother. Sengizwile ukuthi kuthiwa obrigado. Nginitshelile ukuthi ngiyayazi mina le shandisi, so ningangimind mina, ngingafuni ukufana nami. Thank you very much, my brother. We are moving on now. Having received these opening statements from our Brazilian counterparts, we'll now go to the Russian Federation. Alina. Guys, we can do better than that for the Russian Federation. That sounds more like it. That sounds more like an African welcome.
Okay, so I have a presentation, and can we put it on? Yes. How can I put this one? Yeah, no. Okay, that's not the right one.
It's not the right one.
Yeah, it's another presentation.
Not this one.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so finally, hello everyone. Thank you, our dear guests and colleagues, for being here, and a great thank you to the South Africa for such a warm welcome. My name is Alina, and I'm going to present to you the Russian view on what initiatives can be implemented so that new opportunities through the African Continental Free Trade Agreement would be reached. To start with, let me briefly mention. I believe it would work. It's not clicking.
I'm supposed to get more from here.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so to start with, let me briefly mention what are the objectives of the agreement. As many of you know, the overall objectives of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement are to increase social economic development, reduce poverty, and improve Africa's competitiveness in the global economy. Under the agreement, members committed to eliminate tariffs on most goods within 5, 10, or 13 years, depending on the country's level of development and or the nature of the products. The overall long-term goals include the creation of a single liberalized market, the reduction of capital and labor barriers, to facilitate investment, the development of regional infrastructure, and the creation of a continental custom union. The agreement entered its operational phase in July of 2019. However, not much has been done to date in terms of commitments made on tariff eliminations. The desirable opportunities that are going to be discussed during the summit will become tangible only if there is a real trade of real liberalization amongst the parties to the agreement. However, Russia is ready to present a few initiatives that could be productive not only for the African continent, but for the whole BRICS group. To start with, it would be advised not to look at how youth can add to the BRICS cooperation. The success of talented young entrepreneurs and technology innovation hubs across the world shows that young population can be drivers for change for many countries in the coming decades. How exactly can youth be included in the wholesome economic process? We believe that creating business incubators is the most beneficial way for many reasons. A few of them that could be mentioned here: a collection of successful business practices, wholesome expert support, exchange of entrepreneurs, and investment. Overall, it would allow minds from different countries to set up a productive dialogue and achieve certain results. What can also be added to this initiative is introduction of tax incentives for young entrepreneurs. Firstly, this could be realized between South African and Russian individuals, and then this practice can be shared by all African or BRICS members countries. Our delegation has been formed by the Federal Youth Agency for the Youth Affairs, and it is willing to initiate such a practice. Another major initiative the Russian delegation is willing to present today has been mentioned by our speaker of other tracks. What I'm talking about is formation of an expert community of BRICSologists in the global space. Just as it is beneficial in terms of ecology or any other field, it is also advantageous for trade and economic relations. We consider that this is a great way to disclose various possible types of risks and challenges that could be faced by countries. It is always better to be aware of all the possibilities. Thus, such a community will constantly develop on its own, made progress, and it will be helpful to those who are in charge of making trade policy decisions or any type of intergovernmental or economic relations. To be more specific, one of the possible variants to focus is agriculture. For the reason that all BRICS countries give this industry a great deal of importance and a high potential in terms of this area. And finally, looking at the African experience, it is undoubtable that creating free trade agreements among countries can unlock various opportunities for the participants. Therefore, the possible benefits for the BRICS countries are certain when talking about a free trade zone for the group. In addition, previously mentioned business incubators and expert community would play a huge role in the progress of creating a single trade market. Moreover, this idea was presented by Musa Mhele, head of the South African city of Durban, in 2022. According to him, such a decision would promote trade relations within the alliance. Thus, all 5 countries would be able to unlock new opportunities via creating such free trade zone. Thank you, everyone, so much for your attention. That is all.
Thank you very much to our Russian colleagues. We now move along, and I hope you guys are taking notes. I'm also trying to take as many notes as I can so that maybe when we get to the questions and answer sessions, our discussions will flow. We would now go to our Indian colleagues. Are we ready, Team India? Okay, yeah. Can I ask my brother Prem to come and deliver on behalf of India? Guys, we can do better than that. This is Durban. Yeah, that sounds more like it.
But South Africa, you also have to take a part of blame in this, because after such an amazing lunch, it's not that easy to be very active. So good afternoon and warm welcome again to all of you, dignitaries, colleagues, and the dynamic youth that is present in the hall. So now ahead we have a panel discussion on the Commission 4, that is unlocking opportunities through African Continental Free Trade Agreement. So I'm not going to elaborate in detail about this agreement and how to unlock the opportunities, but instead we thought to focus on the agreement itself. So better understanding of the agreement would help us to unlock more ideas how to utilize this agreement. So let's start with the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. Yeah, the latency seems to be a little slow. Okay. Perfect. So you can all see here from basically from the slide, and most of you would have been aware that this is a landmark trade agreement. When I say landmark, because out of WTO, this is the only agreement which is one of the largest or largest because of the members size that are present in this agreement. So 54 African Union member states are part of the single market for goods and services. And the main advantage of, or the main idea behind creating this African Continental Free Trade Agreement is to promote economic diversification, industrialization, and sustainable development. So now let's discuss about a little about the diversification. See, any idea of free trade agreement is to promote the specialization in the continent or in that free trade area. So, for example, if some countries are focused or experts in oil and energy, and others are experts in terms of mineral resources, and then there is some country which is specialized in manufacturing, this trade agreement enables all of them to work on their strengths instead of competing with each other. so that by focusing on their own strengths, they can actually compete in the international market rather than competing within the African region. So this helps in promoting that specialization, diversification, and also helps in the development of the entire region. And you can see here that it was established in 2018, but it came into force on January 2021, making it as the largest free trade agreement. And what are the key features of this agreement? The key features are mainly, first thing is tariff elimination. So this agreement targets to eliminate about 90% of the goods that are traded across Africa, and rest 10% also to be targeted in later through a phased approach. And the other important feature of this agreement is rules of origin. So this agreement focuses on the products that are produced within the Africa. So to identify, there are certain rules that are set up to identify the rules of origin. And we have the unique thing about this agreement is that it is not only about the goods but also the services and investment. So it covered the cross border collaboration of various emerging sectors. For example, right now you see industrial revolution 4.0, and you all talk about the digital world. So this agreement covers all those latest technological areas, and also finance and transportation. So we have seen now the key features, but what are the main challenges that are actually that we need to address in terms of unlocking the opportunities that this agreement has to offer? So the main challenge is the infrastructure deficit. So we see like there are two types of infrastructure deficit. One is physical infrastructure deficit, and the other is a digital infrastructure deficit. When we come to the physical one, you can see how challenging it is to travel within Africa, even by air. Some of the countries are not connected by air, even they are neighbors. So this is very important that uh, addressing the deficit in terms of the connectivity, not just air, but also road and railways connectivity within Africa is very important to utilize the 100% potential of this agreement. And similarly, we have non-tariff barriers. So far we discussed about the tariff barriers and how to address them by reducing it by about 90%. But there are some non-tariff barriers, especially because not all African countries are English-speaking countries, and we have different cultures, different languages that are spoken. So in any market to do research for a private company, this becomes a big challenge. So these non-tariff barriers also needs to be addressed, which is again an important challenge in terms of exploring the 100% potential of this agreement. And the last but very important point is capacity building. So we all know that African growth would help everyone, especially small scale sector and small and medium enterprises, only when they are capable of exploiting the benefits of this agreement. Otherwise, it would be only the large scale enterprises. So we need to build those capacity for the African businesses, especially small and medium enterprises, through training and especially giving them finance and technology. And recently, there were some efforts that are done by African Continental Free Trade Area in this regard, which is very welcoming. But we need to pitch in with private sector and public sector collaboration to address those gaps. So now I have discussed so far about the challenges, but I would also like to just walk you through the important opportunities that are available in this African Free Trade Agreement. So if we see, there are four important areas. One is the market research. As I discussed, the private companies need that kind of comprehensive market research in this area to enable them to push that growth across Africa, and especially in certain countries where this potential is huge, but there are bottlenecks. And similarly, we need to optimize the supply chains. For example, South Africa is, or southern region of Africa is very good in one part of the business chain, then it needs to consolidate and optimize that supply chain to ensure that competitive advantage is retained here. So that's about the supply chain optimization. And similarly, without innovation and technology, we can't move the business in this world. In this, especially the days where we have different regions, different countries competing, especially in technology sector. So we have to help the African Continental Free Trade Area in terms of leveraging the innovation and technology innovation that's happening. And finally, I come to the BRICS part, especially where we need to foster this international cooperation and collaboration from African Free Trade Area with various other regional organizations and the countries, and to expand this potential. So, with this challenges and the opportunities that we have discussed so far, I would like to conclude with just these 3 points: that African Free Trade Continental Agreement, we believe, India especially, that we have huge potential, especially because India is already, or Indian private industry is also investing heavily in Africa. And this investment would be much more fruitful if there is a united market in Africa, which would help not only India but also all the BRICS countries in terms of further collaborating with the African free continental free trade area. And by eliminating barriers and promoting regional integration and enhancing competitiveness, the African Continental Free Trade Area can drive not just economic growth, but can create jobs and improve the standard of living for millions of Africans. So let's seize this historic opportunity to explore and unlock the full potential of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. Thank you.
Another round of applause, please. Okay. Okay, thank you very much to our Indian counterparts. Last but very much not least, we will welcome our Chinese counterparts who will make their opening statement. Ms. Gao, please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. My name is Gao Xinqi. I'm from China Youth Center for International Exchange, which is a youth organization under the leadership of All China Youth Federation. And we aim to promote communication and cooperation in the fields just like trade and economy and innovation, entrepreneurship, education, and environmental protection. So it is my great honor to share with us opinion about the topic of unlocking opportunities through the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. So as we all know, today development is the common aspiration of all nations. So facing opportunities and challenges, African come together for the implementation of African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which will release the untapped potential of Africa. By further lowering tariff and removing the trade barriers, I believe the free trade agreement will enable the free flow of goods, capital, services, which will significantly benefit the African economic transformation, people's welfare, youth development, and global participation, as well as BRICS and Africa cooperation, and also China and African cooperation. I think first we should think about the opportunity for African and the world development. With tariff breaks and the scheduled removal of non-tariff barriers, the free trade agreement will stimulate cross-border trade and investment within Africa, and also attract more foreign direct investment, which will create a favorable environment for business, especially small and medium-sized enterprise. And also, the free trade agreement will enable Africa to participate in international economic negotiations in one position and with one voice, which will increase Africa's expressions in the global economy, and also as well as global influence with an integrated voice. And once fully implemented, the free trade area will unleash more opportunities for African member countries with an expected almost 0.5% increase of employment and average GDP, and also lifting 50 million people out of extreme poverty. and employment. It will benefit economy, agriculture, food security, industrial transformation, and restructuring, thus eliminating the ground of violence, create a better environment for youth development, youth employment, and entrepreneurship. As a flagship project of 2063 of the African Union. So I think we think seize this opportunity and work together to achieve the vision of sustainable and inclusive growth, which contribute to the SDGs of UN Agenda of 2030. And second, I think we should think about the BRICS and African complementarity win-win cooperation. So there is a natural complementarity between the BRICS and Africa in their trade structures, such as China as the world's factory can supply affordable manufactured goods to African countries. And India, the back of office of the world, can supply just like software and services. And Russia is a key exporter of oil and gas. Brazil is an essential provider of materials with soy, oil, and South Africa, with abundant mining resources, is an important producer of mining products and precious metals. So I think we should create together to establish our free trade zones, and especially we can summarize our experience to establishment our envisioned BRICS free trade area. And the third, we should see this opportunity for China-African cooperation. I think we should strengthen cooperation in the field of digital economy because I think with a free trade agreement in the African continental will foster e-commerce platform at national, regional, and continental scales. And in recent years, the rapidly growing digital economy make our life more better and convenient. So we suggest that we can strengthen exchanges and cooperation among young people in starting business in the digital economy, such as in the field of e-payment, health, medical devices, online shopping, and express delivery. And also as youth and youth organizations, we should think about what the youth organization can do to take part in the process and what we can do for young people. So I think as most of our young people even don't know what the free trade area is. So I think we should carry out more exchange programs to visit just like free trade zones or to visit in industrial parks, entrepreneurial facilities, and resource to let more people know the business environment, support policies, industrial incubation facilities, and resource network coverage. And then we can make our free trade area more youth development friendly. So we need to make policies more valuable and services more accurate. We need to know the actual urgent needs of youth. And we need to further strengthen the training of young people's ability to innovation and start up business. Also, as youth organization, we should establish youth innovation and entrepreneurship platforms through our youth organizations. In recent years, our Chinese Federation have devoted exchanges with young leaders, youth organizations, international organizations, some innovation programs with countries from Shanghai Cooperation Organization, China, and Eastern Europe countries. And also our exchange center in this year, April, we successfully hosted the International Cooperation and Development Conference for Young Entrepreneurs. And we initiated to establishment an international organization, which is called International Young Entrepreneurs Alliance, with youth entrepreneur organizations from 33 countries to the founding members. The countries are from America, Oceania, Africa, and Europe. So it is very important to establishment a platform for young entrepreneurs to share their opinions. And we need to promote exchanges and cooperation among young entrepreneurs from various countries in the fields just like economy and trade and technological transfer, business innovation, entrepreneurship, employment, and project incubation, and so on. So I think at the development of free trade area, China had established the first free trade area in 2013, and it has increased to 21 in this year. So I think the most important is it is necessary to keep up with the trend of our times, constantly improve the level of infrastructure and business environment, and further enhance the facilitation of economic and trade cooperation inside and outside the continental. So the most important thing, I think, is we should work together with our BRICS countries. We need to together share our wisdom, share our experience. Together, we can create a better future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much. We're now entering the second segment of our program. I'm going to request the following panelists to join me on the floor for us to be able to expand on this discussion a little bit more. I'm going to ask Mr. Matthew Mensah, who is the CEO of Rebranding Africa and the ambassador of Ghana Tourism, Arts, Culture to South Africa. A round of applause. My brother, please take a seat. And I'm also going to ask Mr. Okechuku. I really hope you, by the end of this session, you will teach me how to pronounce your surname. He is the executive head of 22 on Sloan. A round of applause. Now, because you know me, it was never going to be a boys' choir. We're always going to introduce flavor to this discussion. Can I ask you guys to allow me to introduce Miss Ayanda Zulu, who is a crop and livestock commercial farmer. Usho ukuthi nini ngakaloboli. Nangu umuntu ezothenga kuyena inkomo. Shani izandla madoda ngoba ngizoze nginibize ngamagama enu eningalobolile. Thank you very much. Please do join us. So during the discussion, colleagues, we are going to allow for an engagement through a Q&A session. So if you have any questions during our discussion, please do note them so that when we allow, we will be able to, within reasonable time, we will be able to finish all the work that we're supposed to do. Okay, guys, everyone's got mics? Okay. All right. Thank you very much, guys, for joining me in this very important discussion. We've heard our guests who've made their opening statements around their understanding of what the African Free Trade Continental Agreement is all about and how they believe from the perspective of their countries, they'll be able to partner with us as young people in order to allow for an effective development around trade and in improving our trade routes. But maybe let me start with you, Matthew. Just from your understanding of this, what are the key challenges and opportunities that at this stage still prevent us from realizing what was ably explained here by our colleagues? You know, our Indian colleagues did a job better than mine in explaining the agreement. So, I mean, having looked at that and having listened to that, what do you think are the missing challenges and opportunities that are lost at this stage?
Okay, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. I think probably the main challenges is still about awareness. You know, for this to be successful, it has to be something that especially the youth will be buying into, and so that's why you have to engage much more with the youth to be able to understand what AFTC, FTA is about, EFTA is about, and of course as well, then you have some of the things as the gentleman from India also mentioned, you know, the infrastructure. You know, I think since this idea came up, this concept came up, and it was put into place. Of course, for us in Africa, in Ghana, I mean, it's really, really something that will change the dynamics of our country, because we import so much from outside. Number one, we should be, of course, better to ensure that we can produce much more. Right now we sell our cocoa instead of producing chocolate ourselves. This is something we're just starting now. So with after, you will be able to have a much better trade between the countries on the continent. For example, right now, it's easier for us in Ghana to sell produce to UK, etc., than selling it to South Africa and vice versa. And those are the challenges that have to be changed. That is one of the reasons why that AFTA was created. And for us, especially in Ghana, with after having the headquarters in Accra, is something that our president is very focused on ensuring that doing everything possible to make sure that this becomes a success. But the challenges for me, I feel, is that to ensure that it's not just high level, that people that really are the ones who are going to be benefiting from after really know about it, and that is the youth. And we have to make sure that we engage them much more for them to understand what after is about, and they have to buy into it as well, because they are the one who will be dealing with it going forward.
Interesting. Speaking of engaging young people and making sure that they understand, let me bring a perspective of a young person who operates two farms, one at Dundee and the other one at Shorwen. These are farms that are based in KZN. But I mean, before today and before you were part of this panel, your understanding of the free trade agreement, which allows African countries to trade amongst each other without tariffs and sort of opening up a market. Were you aware of this? Had you ever interacted with this? And in your business, being in agriculture, primarily one of the issues that Africa deals with is that we are food insecure at the moment. Do you see this agreement as helping and relating to the work that your agricultural company does?
Thank you for the opportunity. Good day, everyone. Initially, because I'm on the groundwork, as a farmer, I farm every day, and we have challenges every day in farming because we feel like our government doesn't understand the sector or how important agriculture is. Because as long as there's a human being on this earth, food will always be important. Before I came here, there's one thing, because I've learned so much already, but when you're on the ground, we see that we have so many laws that prevent us from accessing free trade. For instance, when you're at the farm, you are told about certain rules. For when you plant, because I do beans, cabbages, and maize, you are told that this cabbage is of a certain what, and you can't trade it, or you can't send it to a certain area. So there's always like a red tape or rules that block us to access. Also, it goes back to accessing the market, because with us, we're still on them where we are struggling to access the market. As farmers on the ground, whenever you plant, say, because as I'm talking about the crop side, I'll go to the livestock because that's the most difficult one. With our crops, we plant for 90 days, especially cabbages and spinach. And during that 90 days, you are trying to find a market. We can't not depend only on our Pick and Pays Spars, because there's a long line, a long queue with other young farmers that are doing so well. Their product is of quality. And then you can't just say, take Ayanda's one, why yours, when there's like so many rules, or we don't know who to sell our produce to. So as you're talking about this topic of free trade, I feel like the laws, the rules, the red tape, or the people that make decisions don't really understand what agriculture is all about. Thank you.
Interesting. And I think for hearing from a young person who's on the ground, who understands literally on the ground, Mr. Okachuku, from your point of view, having listened to that, what it's supposed to be, what it looks like on the ground, how would you say both tie up in the kind of role maybe that governments, private sector, civil society will have to play in order to make sure that the the noble ideas around which the African Free Trade Area Agreement was set up are realized? Because I think we've now heard what it's supposed to be, we've heard what it is at the moment.
Thanks, Tuli, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to NYDF for the invite. I think for every young person, I think the challenge that, because also I run a startup campus where there's a lot of young people, either tech or non-tech, trying to create products, trying to assess markets, trying to assess funding, and sometimes it's difficult. So I think with the AFCFTA, I think there are a few things we need to look at. I think one is, how do we look at fiscal policies, right? So fiscal policies in terms of taxation for businesses like them, what opportunities exist there for businesses like them to be given some tax incentives to be able to do business with other countries. So I think that is one thing we can look at. The second thing we can also look at is maybe human movement, right? Moving of people, because she's doing cabbages, other people are doing several things, but I think the gentleman from India also mentioned that in Africa it's difficult even to travel. And my view is that if we cannot move humans, we can't move goods, right? And I think, how do we ensure that Miss Zulu, right? Miss Zulu connects with a fellow Miss Okechukwu in Nigeria, or Mr. Mensah in Ghana, or something like that, you know. And if Miss Zulu needs to go three cities to get to us, then it's a problem. And I think the third thing we can look at is maybe leadership, because I think we still have, and our combined leadership with inequality that still exists on the continent, because it could be easy for Ms. Zulu to get grants in South Africa, but it might not be easy for Mr. Hassan that is in Sudan to get the same grant, right? So I think we need to look at, how do we have leaders that understands, like she said, the issues on the ground, that understands what startups, what SMEs need to succeed. And I think the last part is corporates also. How do we leverage the corporates that already exist in Africa, because they need to create, ensure that their supply chain are streamlined, even to be able to bring someone like Zulu into their supply chain, because a company like Pick and Pay could already be trading with someone in Ghana, with a big company in Ghana. So how can Ms. Zulu fit into that supply chain also of Pick and Pay to be able to reach Ghana, and so on? So I think there are various things. I would say fiscal policies, human movement, leadership linked to inequality, and then leveraging our corporates to be able to ensure access to markets for our startups. Yeah.
Coming to you, my brother Matthew, I think there's an important point raised around taxation by Mr. Kochuku. You know, and this is a point that we did hear in previous conversations at the summit. And I think maybe we've arrived at a point where, as an outcome of one of the outcomes of this youth summit, must be serious questioning around the taxation model and the ability to unlock some of the potential that lies latent at the moment in our economy, to give opportunities of equality and equal access to markets for a company like that of Mrs. Zulu. So what are your thoughts around the need to either maintain or change the taxation regime based on what you know of South Africa today, and maybe contrast that with the work that you do from your home country, and how do you think the two can be able to be synergized?
Well, I mean, that is one of the key areas for AFTA to be able to work. I mean, for us, I mean, we know in Ghana why things are so expensive, because of the high tariffs, because we import so much, where South Africa doesn't import as much as we do. But But of course, for it to be able to work, those tariffs have to be brought down, the taxation, because otherwise you also exclude a lot of young entrepreneurs that would have an interest in being part, like, for example, as Ms. Zulu just spoke about before, those are the challenges, and she's just one of many that are trying their very best to be able to set something up for themselves, but they're met with so many high tariffs that they don't even have a chance to actually not only look about, trying to produce something that can sell across South Africa, but let alone to export it to Ghana or Kenya, etc. And that is those very high tariffs, And for us to be able to succeed with after, we have to make sure we took those taxations down, because look at youth, like, around, not only in South Africa but across. COVID have still played a part in having even more people that's, like, suffering from unemployment. There's a less opportunity still, because we're still battling with the economic downfall from COVID. We haven't really fully recovered yet, and for us to now find ourselves in a situation where you want to have young people to take advantage of after, we have to also give them a fair incentive for them to be able to have a chance to start with, and that's one of those points where we still have to focus much more than what I think is being done right now on youth. And I would say youth, especially as well, female entrepreneurs, because it's a fact, that within the continent still, is still much harder for female entrepreneurs than for us male entrepreneurs, and we have to be able to look at that, to be able to take that into consideration, and ensuring that young women have a better chance to be taking advantage of some of those things that we are trying to ask them to be part of when it comes to trading. But also, just to quickly mention that, for example, with share butter, share butter is one of those things that are highly used, especially like in South Africa. Every time I come back to South Africa, a lot of my female friends ask, "Oh, did you bring share butter or black soap, etc.?" And we should be able to trade those things by ourselves. I find sometimes when I go to supermarkets here in South Africa, you will find shea butter that are from Ghana, but it was sold from Ghana to UK in big containers, like unrefined. They would now put different perfume in and put it in nice boxes and sell it to South Africa, which is complete outrageous, that we are not doing that ourselves. The same as well now, for example, I'm here in Durban. I'm having meetings as well with Durban City, because Durban City, of course, is a port city. Accra is a port city, and we are now trying to put up a partnership between the two, which we should have done a long time ago. We had those conversations years back, but we did never implement it. But still, there's a lot of young farmers like Ms. Zulu that could take advantage of that. But us, because we buying all our meat from outside, a lot of our meat buying from Venezuela, etc. Why are we not buying it from South Africa when South Africa is known for having some of the best meat, not only in Africa, but in the world? So it doesn't make sense that we are buying it outside when we get it easily from here, from South Africa.
Indeed. Maybe before we go to the questions from the floor, Ms. Zulu, and I asked this for the benefit of someone who's sitting here, because we've had a chat before, and you've told us about your inspirational story of how is it that you got into farming. And please, before we just get there, maybe answer this question. Maybe introduce to us how is it that a Bachelor of Education graduate found herself with Jimmy Green shoes and instead of a stiletto. How did that transition happen? And COVID, it affected many emerging businesses. I know the agriculture sector was one of those sectors that were allowed to operate, but obviously it doesn't operate in isolation of all the other input. How did COVID, as a second part of my question, after you've done your first story, how did COVID affect your business, and how are you sort of bouncing back at the moment from a point of view of working on the farm?
Thank you for your question. Firstly, I'll just go to what Matthew was saying just now, that there's this block which we don't understand. Maybe you guys can make me understand as a woman on the ground, like I said. It's very difficult, especially being a woman in the agricultural space. I own over 350 cattle, over 162 goats. I run two farms that supply almost the whole of Zululand and King Cetshwayo alone. But every time when I try to access certain markets as a woman, I am being deprived. And it's very difficult and it's such an emotional topic because I'm like, but I've done so much. Why so many laws that block me as a woman? Because some, in some instances, I'd go to an auction because there are auctions where we buy and sell cows. Whenever I'm there to sell mine, I would see that there's a lot of inequality happening in South Africa. I'm sorry.
No, take your time.
And I guess that's because one, I'm black, I'm young, and it doesn't make sense because this sector is closed. It's for certain people. I literally fight almost every day because I'm encouraging other young people that want to be like me. But it's not easy. It's the laws, it's inequality, and it's not fair. I'm sorry.
No, no, that's okay.
Also about how I started and how education actually gets into farming. When I finished my matric, I went to UJ to study. When I got there, because my mom is a teacher, everyone at home is a teacher now. So my mom also, when you are raised by a teacher, they also convince you to be a teacher because she'll tell you that you will get a job definitely. You're not going to stay at home. But it was an unfortunate thing for me. I couldn't get a job. My brothers also completed. I was the only one staying at home. So I ended up being the one who stays at home, cleans. I take cars to dealerships for service. They'd send me like I was running errands at home. And then this one day, I went to a dealership to service my dad's car. When I got there, I saw a guy buying a car cash. And because I loved money, but I knew it's not. I went to ask this guy because I always tell the youth of South Africa when you're young, you need to fetch your life, ask questions, and also listen to other people so that you can have more information. So I went to this guy, a tall, big guy wearing khakis. I wear khakis every day, but somebody today told me to look a bit nicer, so that's why I tried. So when I went to this guy, I asked him, "What do you do? Why would you buy a car cash? How much money do you make?" And this guy's like, "I'm a farmer." And I'm like, "Farmer? What do farmers do?" That's another thing in South Africa. We don't have access to information. I was like, I'm from a tertiary level. I was confused what farming is, but I eat every day. That's where our curriculum has also got a problem. We trade every day, but the youth of South Africa doesn't know what happens in the harbor in Durban. The youth of South Africa doesn't know what happens to the gold in Joburg. The cutting of trees to make to actually send them to Italy to make wood. The youth of South Africa don't know that because the South African curriculum is not teaching us those important things that will make South Africa a better place. Because truth be told, agriculture is the only vehicle that will help our economy. Another thing, so when I was done with this guy, he told me he's a farmer and he was so looking forward to his car. He didn't even have time for me. And then I was like, I will go home and research about agriculture. I started going back home. Another point, it's very difficult to access land as a young person or a black person in South Africa. I didn't get land. I had to lease it from someone who was struggling and I was paying them. Imagine paying someone, you also not working because you want to work. So that was very difficult. So I continued with farming, ended up buying 7 cows. I ended up being a middleman for other farmers until I got my own funding, until I started buying my own farms, and then now this is where I am.
Indeed, inspirational, yeah.
Yes. And with the cows that I have, I send my cows to butcheries. I send them to people who do feedlots. I breed Brahmins, pure white Brahmins. I breed beef masters. I breed bronze maras. And my kettles are the ones on the Shaka Zulu movie.
Wow. Okay. Wow.
But yes, going back to COVID, I'm sorry, I just had to say that.
Yeah, it's very important. Yeah. It's actually part of fetching your life, eh?
Are you still fetching
Very
your life because
important.
you're invoicing? Okay. So with the COVID happening, I think agriculture was the only sector that was still functioning during COVID. And people were worried about food because they couldn't go out, but they were worried about things that relate to agriculture, medication, food. So I'm just trying to bring you guys to understand how important agriculture is and how neglected agriculture is. And during COVID, we actually survived because, okay, we didn't survive well because I had to sell even the things I didn't plan to sell. You know, we have cows that we can take out to markets, but because the demand was too much and there's only a little of us, it's not, we don't have a lot of farmers. We only have white farmers in South Africa. The black ones are probably like 10 who can supply at a big scale. I'm not saying see, we don't have black farmers, we do, but people who supply at a big scale where you can send about 20 cows a day or 100 cows in your feedlot a day. It's not every black farmer. So the demand was very high and we couldn't supply well.
Interesting. Thank you very much for that story. We're about to take questions. I'll start from my left and we'll go that way. And you know, Ms. Zulu, just as an anecdote to what you're talking about, being hard in this country when you are a young person, I'll give you a story just today. We live here, we go for lunch. We get there, there's a table we sat at yesterday. So naturally, we are creatures of habit. You sit where you sat yesterday, you know. We had actually forgotten the fact that yesterday we were sitting with an old person who's regarded as a VIP. Mama Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. Now the rest of us go to the same table we sat at. We are told, no, you can't sit here because we're waiting for a VIP. And you know, we try and explain that no, but Miss Luaga is the chair of the board, you know, and it hasn't gotten to the minds of society that young people could be people of authority as well. You know, society is not ready for a VIP who looks like Asanda, you know, because to them a VIP must be a 70-year-old who's a minister, and you know, the fact that there's Nompendulo here who's a young member of parliament, and we explain to them, actually, that VIP accounts to that one. They don't understand it because Nompendulo is our age and people are like, but you know, so some of these things are not necessarily legislated, but they're also biases that are held by society, because the picture of authority is not a young person who's your age. I mean, when you get to the auction, they look at you and they say, "Where's your father, who sent you to bring back?" Go and tell your father, want to negotiate with your father for the price. You know, because the assumption is the only way you could be at auction is if you're sent by your father. So some of these things aren't necessarily legislated, but they're really biases held by society around what the picture of authority is. We'll take that question, yes, my brother. Number one, we'll take number two, we'll take number three, we'll take number four. Behind this pillar, I don't know if there's anyone here. We'll then take number five, yes, my brother, and number six. Number seven, right there. And I think seven is for Christians, they would know what seven means. So I think we are sufficiently comforted in seven. Please do introduce yourself and keep your questions short. If you can, direct it at a specific person. If it's a general comment, also keep it short. And no preambles. We've also greeted the president in absentia. There's no need. Don't greet, just say who you are and
Okay.
continue.
My name is Zenzele from Future Life Institute in Japan. It's a comment, it will be short. I don't know if the panel would also comment on it, on the issue of free trade. If the free trade among the BRICS countries, if they think or they see that the free trade among the BRICS countries need to be separated from the free trade among the African continent, that they should be based on different principles, maybe such as establishing the free trade area among those zones. I don't know, because we make sure that we don't end up having the Investors Protection Act like we had on the Algoa and other free trade agreements, so-called free trade agreements. The second question, that one I will need a comment from the panel. What is their view and their perspective on that, on the separation of the free trade between Africa, within African countries and South Africa, and among the BRICS countries? And then the second question I want to also directing to everyone in the panel. What will it be done so that whenever we have this trade, we make sure that we not become the assemblers? Whenever people they send their cars under the free trade agreements, we not become people who are assembling BMW, but German still continues to manufacture. We also become the manufacturers. What are these key principles that they think should be taken into consideration to make this forward? I will stop here before I'm stopped. Thank you.
Number 2.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Noktula Zibi, the National Chairperson of the South African Youth Council. I want to start with Ayanda. Ayanda, you're doing a good job. Don't cry, you deserve it, and things will come. Every Black South African woman deserves to lead different spheres of society, and you're doing a good job where you are. Now, I don't have a specific person to direct this to, but maybe because NYDA is here, BRICS, everyone else will catch and they will respond. India spoke on capacity building with the issue of trade. Now, capacity building with youth-owned businesses needs to be monitored. Who will be doing the monitoring so that it does not happen and it does not touch young people that want to be involved in those processes? Now, Ayanda mentioned when she was presenting that there was an issue of lack of awareness, but beyond lack of awareness, there was issue of red tape in terms of this country would want this one would not. When I read the African Trade Agreement, on Article 3, it also speaks of protocols. Each country has its own protocol. It's not stipulating which protocol is specific of this particular country, which will mean as a young business person in South Africa, I would not know protocol measures of Ghana. But maybe if BRICS or if the African Trade Agreement could assist with maybe giving a bit more detail on the protocol part of issues. We already, as young people, have issues with awareness on certain policy agreements that take place. Now, if you have just the agreement without other stipulations on it, obviously it will fall through the cracks and I would not know how to move forward. As my last,
Please.
as I sit down, the issue of awareness, and I'm putting this on the NYDA. Maybe with all the policies that are made through our international platforms, it also becomes your duty as an agency of South Africa to make sure that we have a full understanding on those policies and how they affect as we move along as young people of the country, so that when we get to platforms like this, we do not make mistakes. Thank you.
Siyabonga. Number 3.
Ngiyabonga. The name is Balesa Libenya. I am the Provincial Secretary of the South African Youth Council in KwaZulu-Natal. First of all, same sentiments as my fellow colleague to Ustis Ayanda on the beautiful work that you're doing. We've seen you all over social media. So at least there's one thing you're doing well, you're marketing you're using the markets you're using channels that are there to market yourself as a young person, and you must continue to do that. And hopefully from this platform, you're actually going to get more assistance moving forward. I wanted to ask you, do you feel like it's the food systems that are preventing you from accessing free trade, the free trade markets? Also, I wanted to ask you panelists out there, do you think that your individual governments are doing enough to inform young people about the opportunities that are there for them, and women and youth? Because you know what, most of the time we have beautiful laws in our countries, which we applaud every day, but they do not get to the people that actually need to understand such laws that are there to protect them and to also give them opportunities. Currently, myself, I feel like the people that are benefiting from this Africa free trade are established industries, established companies, because they have the resources. How can government assist young people and young women as well to make sure that they are developed and they create a product that can be recognized and that can be well accepted in the African market and also in the international market? Thank you.
Number 4.
Thank you very much. My name is Ndumi Sohadebe from the Gauteng Youth Advisory Panel. I'm a South African delegate. I think my question is related to some of the viewpoints that have been shared by the panel members here this afternoon, specifically in relation to the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. Oftentimes, it's framed around tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers. And I think in the African context, a lot of the barriers that we face are non-tariff in nature. Our brother Matthew highlighted the example, which is a product that is commonly used in this environment. And so perhaps my question in this regard, in trying to industrialize the African continent so that we can be able to not only trade freely, but to trade complex products that all of us use in order to grow all of our economies of the continent. Is there space in which we can be able, number one, to have some kind of sharing when it comes to the project preparation of industrialized projects? A lot of the times when we engage with development banks, both on the continent and around the world, there are weaknesses that are highlighted around lack of capabilities in relation to the preparation of projects, be it technical preparation from a financial modeling point of view, and you have it. And I think that is potentially an area that we can focus on as young people in this summit to say, what are the barriers that we have in relation to the preparation of projects that are catalytic and that can ensure that the industrialization of the continent happens so that we can leapfrog and take advantage of the free trade area. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Number 5.
Yes, hello, Min Chao Mao from the Chinese delegation. I have a question concerning the African Free Trade Agreement and also the BRICS countries. There has been proposals has been made to establish a BRICS free trade agreement, just as my brother who raised the question first have mentioned. But there's another question about the currency, which currency we're going to use in such free trade agreements framework, because we talked about transforming the international financial governance yesterday and talking about changing the institutions such as World Trade Organizations or the Bretton Woods system. And that brings me to the question of the de-dollarization. I mean, not using the dollar as the US dollar as one of the main objectives of establishing a new and more inclusive and more equitable trading system. How is your view on this issue? Which, or maybe to be more specific, use if we establish such trading agreement? Is this dollar or is another currency? Because I think it's vital for us, especially for the BRICS countries, to have to challenge this dollar hegemony. Thank you.
Thank you. Umbuzo muhle muhamba nempendulo. Ngiyathemba ukuthi nani niyezwa. Umbuzo ubuzwa nempendulo yawo. Number 6.
Thank you so much, Program Director. My name is Johnny Muteba. I'm the chairman and founder of the Pan-African Chamber of Commerce. We're based in Johannesburg, South Africa, working across the continent. And now we have a presence in the US. I want to start with Ayanda. Your story is truly inspirational. So we need to talk. Our chamber is launching a program called Women Feed Africa. So it's a program of a television network we're setting up. We want to profile the work that is done by women all over the African continent, because the African Development Bank came up with the Feed Africa initiative. And I asked myself a question, who actually feeds Africa? It is women. So we need to talk to see how we can also profile the work that you are doing. The question I have, it's not really a question. I think maybe at the end it will be a question. It is the missing pillar in this conversation, which is Agenda 2063. Dr. Dlamini Zuma was here as the champion of that very powerful plan in terms of where our continent is going to be in the next 50 years. If you look at the Agenda 2063, it speaks of youth, it speaks of women, it speaks of culture. We're talking about sustainable development now. It speaks of youth, it speaks of women, it's quiet on culture. I'm a filmmaker, I'm a producer, I'm a director, and culture, we see it as a missing pillar in sustainable development. The theme of BRICS this year is BRICS and Africa, Partnership for Mutually Accelerated Growth, Sustainable Development, and Inclusive Multilateralism. I feel like culture is actually left out in this conversation with BRICS, but also at the UN level around sustainable development. One of the things we're doing as a Pan-African chamber, chambers of commerce, as you know, they don't really engage in culture and music, film and fashion. Ghana is a case in point. Nigeria, biggest market on the continent in terms of Nollywood and films produced over there. We're talking about the AFCFTA, right? The AFCFTA event that happened in Cape Town in April, we're there. Still within the AFCFTA, culture is not spoken about, but it is in fact the future. It is easier to connect with a song, it's easier to connect with a film and stuff like that. How do we position culture in the conversations within BRICS? Through South Africa as a member state, but also from an African continent perspective. I will speak briefly, lastly, the work we are doing at the Pan-African Chamber. We took the Agenda 2063 of the African Union. I was in Ethiopia 10 years ago when it was launched, and we realized that we cannot no in it. So how do we make sure that we include culture? Look here where we are. I mean, just the beauty of this province, the sound of, the sound of the city, of the province and stuff like that. And all of these places, culture is just something. We come together, some musicians perform here, and that's the end. I mean, we have to be serious. We have to be very intentional. As a chamber of commerce, 2024 in May, in this city, we're doing the Pan-African Music Award, and people ask me, can a chamber of commerce do a music award? Of course we can. Of course we must. Of course we will, right? So as we are deliberating here for many of these young people from all over, don't just come and ask for you. What can you do for this platform? If something is missing, and I can say now culture is missing, we have to find a way of including culture in the space. There's 5 key points that our chamber is setting up. The first one is how we can strengthen partnership and collaboration between the private sector, the creative sector, and business, really. How do we bring business, government, and the creative sector together? Secondly, how do we train the creative leaders of tomorrow? Thirdly, how do we enhance funding and financial support? I am very tired that every single time there's a conversation about anything in Africa, there has to be who is going to pay, about who's going to pay, right? We have to change the mindset. Objective number 4 is about building the infrastructure of the creative sector. The last one and the most important one is marketing brand Africa. BRICS must not come here and basically feel sorry for us. We don't want anybody to feel sorry for us. We have the capacity, we have the resources, but they're actually squandered. We need to find ways of supporting our governments. As a Chamber of Commerce, it's a South African organization. What are we doing about 30 years of freedom in 2024? What are we doing? We want to showcase South African culture in New York, in Los Angeles, in Atlanta, and many of these other cities.
Yes.
Culture is missing and nobody is doing anything about it. Can we think about it? Kizito next year you're doing the Global Entrepreneurship Congress. Where is the place of culture? Where is the place of culture? Thank you.
Thank you. The last person, number 7.
Good afternoon. My name is Karabo Mkhonyana. Sis Ayanda, if you don't hear it enough, thank you so much for your courage and for leading the way for many of us. Just in terms of what is needed, I guess this is my recommendation and then I'll ask my question. We speak a lot about trade in the context of resources, but one of the things that's constantly missing is the technical support that young people actually require to get into trade. So when we're talking about navigating the red tapes, something as simple as what is the AFCFTA? How do we trade? How do we create value chains for young people to navigate that? And in a lot of conversations that actually happen, technical support is something that is constantly missing. My question relates to the informal, and I'm gonna do open quotations, the informal economy in Africa. Trade requires a level of formalization of industry, and in Africa, over 80% of our economies really look informal. And I think that's something I would have wanted us to speak a bit more about in terms of how do we integrate the AFCFTA when the current status of the African economy looks formal and trade requires a high level of formalization, and equally going as far as then integrating BRICS. Because if you're going to integrate trade from a BRICS perspective, you need to formalize a lot of the industries, formalize a lot of the economy, and young people are mainly in the informal economy as well. So how do we navigate that informal economy in Africa and the gaps that exist from a technical support perspective, versus the fact that trade does require a high level of formalization to navigate red tape, to navigate the laws, to navigate all of those technical things that both the international markets but also the AFCFTA requires of the continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all our questions. What I'm going to ask my fellow panelists to do is, I'll start with you, Ndabezit, to, in responding, give us also your closing remarks. And we nearing the end of the conversation, and I think I'll ask the same for you, my brother, and my brother this side, to be able to just give us your closing remarks, but obviously in answering the questions that are directed at you.
Firstly, thank you for the encouragement. It really means a lot. It doesn't go unnoticed. I think I'm going to get out of here feeling much better, even more courageous to do better for other young Black farmers. On the question about what can the BRICS bring, I'd like to highlight this. South Africa has got land. South Africa's got so much land. If maybe in working together, if you guys can bring, I don't want to sound like if I say financial support, I don't want to sound like I'm saying we can't help ourselves, but I mean, if you guys bring equipment, if you make the laws a bit better, I think, and skill, because you also need skills. I've seen on YouTube how they do agriculture in the other countries. If you guys can bring skill for us to produce our own food, bring facilities, and also help in terms of working on the land, because I think we need more assistance, because most of our land is not accessed. We are not utilizing all the land that we have in South Africa. And if we did, I think South Africa would be better, because you're only using a portion. If you drive around, you see in the Free State, we've got so many provinces of land that is not utilized. And also in access to, now this is for South Africa, in access to land, I still don't understand these laws that are stopping Black people from working the land. Because you find someone, they've got the money, and then a person will tell you, from my investment, I bought 30 cows, but I don't have land to keep them. Can I keep them at your farm? We can't be in one corner, yet there's so much land. That's another concern that I have. And also, like she said, Ms. Zenzeli, oh no, Ms. Zimi, she said, what are these laws? Can we be told about them? Because at times as I breed Brahmins, I have stud Brahmins. When you say stud, you mean registered cattle. At times you find that they tell you, no, this one, you can't bring this one here. And I will accept that. But if I was told properly, what makes my produce or my cattle not to qualify at a certain caliber? Can we get a clear information as to what are these laws, who makes these laws, and what is the purpose of these laws that are blocking a South African young or even any other South African? In closing, I would really love for us to actually work together, because I've seen with the poultry industry, it has closed down in South Africa. Most of our meat in chicken is being imported because we can't operate, we can't send our chicken or poultry to other countries. Maybe if we can just sit down, look at the challenges on the ground, because you guys are not only going to make decisions at the top, we work the land and we understand our challenges. Thank you.
Thanks very much to the questions. I think Kaz asked the first question in terms of trade between BRICS, AFCFTA, if that should be separated. My view is this: we live in a global community. We are part of a global market, and I think that, I mean, with AFCFTA, 1.3 billion people, you're looking at an economic block of around 3.4 trillion dollars or so, right? And if we achieve that, what it does to us is that it actually reduces Africa's trade deficit by half. By doing that, Africa will be able also to negotiate better in certain trades between other countries. WTO, World Trade Organization, we have our sister down there, Ms. Okonjo-Iweala. So it's a good opportunity for AFCFTA to connect with the global community, connect with WTO, and be able to work together. So I don't think AFCFTA should remove itself from BRICS or the other way around. I think the global community are very well connected. And then I think there was another question on capacity building for the youth. I think it's very important, and that is why I keep saying corporates are very important to the work that SMEs and startups are doing. Because first is that corporates have resources. Second is that you want to supply potato to a McCain to make chips or something. They have specification, technical requirements on how the potato, they have technical requirements on the soil that should be used, on fertilizer that should be used. So I think it's important also for us as young people to learn these things, to go to these places and ask questions, because the government might not have the solution to say, these are the technical requirements that a McCain will need to supply potato for them. It's left for us also to go to those companies to ask these questions and get that information. And I think on the other questions on if government is doing enough, I think, we must also push. Yes, all over the world, there are issues with the level of support government gives, whether it's enough, whether it's too little. But I also think we have to break the boundaries and push the needle. I think some people might say, Wasim, I'm going to put you on the spot. Some people might say, oh, but what does NYDA do? They don't help us. But the fact is that you have to keep asking, you have to keep going. I mean, so I think we have to get also our young people to push the boundaries a little bit, and also to keep believing, because they might have perceptions of NYDA 10 years ago. It's not the same today. The same with other organizations. So I think we need to do that. The US dollar issue, I won't answer that. It's a political issue. I think I'll leave it to politicians. And I think And I think my sister mentioned on the technical support. This will be my last comment on the technical support for young people and project preparation. Someone else mentioned project preparation. I think it's important, you know, as AFCTA is going on, I think there needs to be a method or a model that we can use to get SMEs to properly prepare, to be able to prepare themselves to be able to assess these opportunities. Even when the president goes for trade visits, there are deal books that are being shared, you know. How can SMEs be part of those deal books? How can they learn more earlier on before even going to these places? But I must say, this is my end, and I must say that as a continent, there are certain things we also have to get right. In order to be able to compete globally, in order to be able to support our SMEs better, there are issues that we need to resolve first. First is performance. Performance of our SMEs, performance of our startups. How do we compare this to the global standards of our peers? The second point will be funding, you know, availability of funding to support SMEs, availability of funding to support someone like Ayanda, and so on. The third one, market reach, you know, similar to what I was telling the colleague that asked the question. So how are we connecting with the global market is very important. You know, we can't remove ourselves from what is happening around us. And I think talent is important. We need to keep on, she mentioned something about education. We are not producing possibly the right people with the right talent to take the right opportunity. And I think that needs to change. And I think if we get some of these right, we will be able to compete with our global peers and stakeholders. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I think I just want to start with Ms. Zulu. It's such an honor to sit up here with you because we had a chance talking with you backstage as well, and your journey, what you're doing, your vision is just fantastic. And I think you're a really great role model for a lot of young people that want to go into agriculture. We spoke about how important agriculture is, and of course as well, there's a lot of need for support, not only in South Africa, but across the continent. But regarding the gentleman that was talking about culture, of course, it's something that is close to my heart, being ambassador for Ghana on tourism, arts and culture. I know, for example, the relationship between South Africa and Ghana, it's really been changed the last couple of years, and culture has been one of the key factors. For example, 2019, when we launched Year of Return, which has become a massive success, we probably had 150, 200 people coming from South Africa. And because of our festivals, Afro Nation, Afrochilla, they really must encourage people to come in their traditional clothing. And those 150 people that came from South Africa, not together, just independently, they all were wearing all their different traditional clothing, the ones that was from like the Zulus and the Mbeles and so on. And, in South Africa and so many other countries around the continent, we have such amazing, beautiful traditional clothing, which for some reason we don't really wear enough. A lot of times we wear it in kind of like celebration. I mean, in West Africa, we wear it on a daily, but a lot of times when I wear traditional clothing here, people are like, oh, what are you celebrating? And it's like, no, it's just a Thursday. But those 150 people, they were trending throughout the whole festival out of 15,000 people because their traditional clothing was so beautiful and really attracted people to ask questions, etc. And that is again shows like we have so much our traditions, like our culture, really is what brings people together. A lot of times because now those happen, and that is about culture. For example, now KZN is widely known in West Africa to be one of the most welcoming provinces when it comes to cultural exchanges. They do a lot on encouraging people to come and film in KZN. And right now as well, we just finished having talks about a group coming from from Ghana and Nigeria to film a new movie in KZN. And credit to the KZN Film Bureau, they were like, okay, but ensure that you have South African talent, South African producers and so on, being part, actors and so on. And that is what really gonna be showcasing the talent that we have across the continent. Like now, if you go to Ghana, anywhere you go, you will hear, if it's not Amapiano, it'll be SA House, it'll be South African hip hop. And that was impossible to hear, like just like 4 or 5 years ago. There was none, if it wasn't Afrobeat, you would not listen to anything. And now, if it's not Amapiano, people will not even come to your events, you know, they don't listen to anything else. You go there and you see people from Ghana, they're like, hey, what's up, and whatever, hypo and stuff like that, you know, and they are so taken into this African culture now, but that has come from culture. It's not something the government has imposed, it's through culture and those engagement. And that's how we get closer to each other, and that's how we start being able to trade even more and learn from each other, you know. For example, I think it's very important as well to a lot of times to also give credit for when our leaders are doing things where we are so easy to criticize, but we're not good enough sometimes to also celebrate the ones that are doing a fantastic job. I mean, for example, we spoke about youth. You have Nompendelo here, who is one of the most remarkable young women that I know, you know, full stop. I've seen her grow from when she was at the university and she was out there fighting for Fees Must Fall and whatnot, you know what I mean? And she's just been so committed, so strong, and so passionate about what she's doing. And that's some of those things as well sometimes for a youth. It's like when you take on something, you know, you have to also go through it. You know, sometimes people, they lose their concentration because of social media and all these kind of things. If you take something on, a passion, you have to also live through it, through the hard times, and not just be there for the fun and good times, you know? For example, now, the South African High Commissioner in Ghana, Her Excellency Grace Mason, she had made sure that just in 2 years, the South African High Commission and South Africa in general has become the #1 country for Ghanaians, you know, because of the engagement. You know, there's so many things that South African High Commission does to engage Ghanaians and to showcase what South Africa has to offer. Just a few months ago, Brand South Africa was in Ghana. We were doing a whole conference about AFCC, FTA. So that also goes into my point about information. The same way as well with NYDA. I mean, the reason why, for example, I'm here today is because I see a lot of the work that's been done for them to push things for youth, not only in South Africa, but also showcase to assist other countries, like our government are benefiting from the acknowledgement and the experience that NYDA has, because we don't have something similar in Ghana. So we benefit from that, and that's why as well, I mean, I'll put the chair and the CEO on the spot here and say, we're waiting for you to come to Ghana. You know, the youth would definitely benefit so much from not only something like this, but also some of the other things that you're doing. In regards to the gentleman from China, I would repeat what Mr. Kachugu said as well before, because I don't think my Minister of Finance would be very happy with me if I started to get into those kind of questions. But I think one of the key things that another gentleman here was asking about regarding project preparations, and I do agree as well. It was a very good question, and it's something that I can see as well, especially from Ghana. One of the things that we are trying to achieve with the relationship and the partnerships with South Africa, we have a lot of city sister partnerships, which some of them have been signed, but they're not really fully implemented. And this is something that is a great shame. This is something we are trying to revise, because when it comes to project preparations, I will be honest enough to say that we really would benefit from a lot of the sectors that you guys have here. You know, you have in SETA, you have food and beverage sector, etc., which we don't have in Ghana. And even though that we have a fantastic tourism industry right now over the last couple of years, but we also must have to be honest that we are lacking a lot when it comes to hospitality, especially when it comes to South Africa. Those are the things where we will benefit, like, you know, regarding some of those exchanges, some of those things, because you cannot expect people to go out and buy your product if it's not up to par. And that's the same thing as well. You cannot expect people to come and patronize your hotel, etc., if you don't give the service that people would expect if they're paying a certain amount of money, whatever currency it might be. And finally, when it comes to awareness on AFC, FTA, again, something like Bandase was doing in Ghana was very, very impactful. And again, for it to be a success, I really believe that the youth have to be much more engaged than what they are now. I promise you, if you go out on the streets and you ask about AFC, FTA with 10 young people, you might find 1 or 2 that would know what it is. And that's not only in East Africa, that is in Ghana, Nigeria, wherever you are. The youth does not know enough about AFC, FTA. A lot of it is on a very, very high level. We need to make sure that the youth get access to that information, and they will be able to help not only youth in general, but also a lot of the young entrepreneurs that's trying to better themselves and actually are working hard to thrive through the business they have chosen to put forward. So finally, I just want to again say it's always a fantastic period for me to be in Durban. It's honestly one of the most amazing cities. I'm not talking about just in Africa, but wherever I travel. Like, my mom is from Denmark, my dad's from Ghana, and when I travel around Europe and so on, like, I'm always like, okay, you have it better in so many different cities, and Durban is definitely one of those cities that I conclude in that. I've been lucky enough to be to every province, apart from Northern Cape, but every province in South Africa, and people don't really see what there is to offer unless you just go out and experience it. It takes some of those road trips, from here across KZN, etc. is stunning. And of course, as well, you have a fantastic meat. I'm a big lover of mogodo. I eat it outside of Mondays. I eat it on Tuesdays as well. But so I want to say thank you very much for the hospitality. It's always a pleasure being here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I wanted to stop you there, Matthew, before you start confessing other things. When you are telling us you are a lover of mogodo, I don't want you to tell us who introduced you to mogodo. Thank you very much to my panelists. Maybe I'm not a politician to our Chinese colleague, but I'll tell you this. South Africa's position on multilateralism is such that we encourage the rise of other financial currencies as well. And you'd know our position on BRICS. We are for the establishment of a common currency amongst BRICS nations. So the position from South Africa is indeed that we would support that greatly. And this is not me. And those who know, I'm a former politician, so I don't speak as a politician. Then, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of our session. What we will do now is, before I ask you to allow me to thank my panelists once more with a round of applause, we are going to announce that we will take a 15-minute tea break, a comfort break. And then once we are done, after 15 minutes, we will come back and enter our last commission for the day. A round of applause for my fellow panelists. Dabezit, siyabonga.